Hello, early adopters, and welcome. I'm just going to give it a few minutes to allow people to join this webinar. We've got quite a lot of interest, so hopefully we're going to get a ton of people joining. So we're just going to give them a little minute to get here. And I am not going to attempt to put on any hold music or sing. Simply fill the time as slowly as possible till we get to, let's say, 3 minutes past or something like 50 attendees, and already it's at 30. So welcome everybody to this Codacy showcase. We're just waiting a little minute. I guess I'm just going to turn it into a repeating message now. It's like you phone the helpline and you're on hold and you're just getting the same thing over and over. You are number 25 in the queue.
We can start speaking more slowly so we can extend it out a bit further.
Yes, excellent idea. How many minutes? I usually reckon on 3 minutes past being actually late when I'm coming to a meeting, honestly. So the room's filling up quite well. Okay, let's make a start, I think, because by the time I got through the preamble, then that gives anyone else a little bit more time to join. So here we go for real now. Hi and welcome to the Codacy Showcase for April 2025. We're doing things a little bit differently today, as I'm sure you can tell already. We usually just walk through all the latest Codacy product updates over the last quarter with some of our product engineers. But today we are shaking things up with a expert panel discussion on the topic of why shift left is failing and how to address it. And on that panel today are me, Kendrick Curtis, VP of Technology at Codacy, and I'll be hosting and asking the questions, which means I don't have to be that smart. So fortunately, we've got 3 smart people in the room. We've got James Bathotti. Would you like to introduce yourself, James?
Sure. I'm James. I was a security engineer for about 10 years and started Latio as a way for engineers to find security tools in a way that cuts through a lot of the marketing stuff.
Great, very succinct. Thank you. Luca, would you like to say hi?
Hi, Kendrick. Thank you for having me. I'm Luca, and I run Refactoring, which is a newsletter that goes out to engineers and managers across the world. Thank you.
Yes, he's very modest, but it's 150,000 engineers across the world, which is pretty cool.
Yes, I'm humble.
And we have Rob Roskin from Unstructured. Robert, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm an engineering manager at Unstructured. Unstructured is an ETL platform for RAG workflows. So we're all in that AI space, doing cool stuff there.
Yeah. And we met Robert as he's worked at a former he worked at a customer who's still a customer of ours, Pantheon, who are a cybersecurity outfit, which gives him hopefully a
Pantheon's a web host. Demartian's cybersecurity. So
I think that gives you a particular insight into what we're talking about anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so quick run through the agenda for today. So the topic was split in 2, why shift left is failing. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Codacy's new concept, Codacy Guardrails. You might have heard us promoting phase 1 around the beginning of April. Now we're on to phase 2. So Alejandro, who's our engineering manager, product engineer, is going to tell us all about that. Then we'll come back to our expert panel to continue talking about why shift left is failing and how to address it. We'll wrap up any outstanding Q&A, and then we'll come to any conclusions we possibly can. For the Q&A, please do use the Q&A panel that you can find in your Zoom console, I guess, and ask any questions as we go along. I will try to seamlessly weave them into the narrative, but just in case I fail, then we'll have time to mop up at the end. And I believe that Vika will be giving away swag, Codacy swag, to anyone who asks a good question that we try and answer. So do try and contribute. We are bribing you for that. Great. So let's begin with why shift left is failing. So I want to come to James first. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we get a nice view of everybody's faces a bit larger. Hopefully that works. James, could you, I guess, tell us your perspective on this? I guess, is shift left failing? You're the security guy, so we're all supposed to be shifting left. Why have we failed to shift left? What's going on?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to what you mean by shift left is the key question. Like all good panels start by, what does that really mean? But if your view of shift left, which it was never really my view, but I've learned that a lot of CISOs thought this way, was I'm going to find vulnerabilities earlier and therefore fix them all faster and save a bunch of money. And then I think they've gotten surprised as their security tools have gotten more expensive, the vulnerability lines have gone up, and they've had to hire DevSecOps, AppSec, product security, whatever fun name we give to the people who manage these sorts of tools. And so I think shift left as a cost saving endeavor as its primary function has sort of failed. And then the other piece of that was if the idea of shift left was that developers are going to organically find security issues and then sort of be overjoyed to navigate those and fix them on their own. And we'd all live in this sunshine world where nobody needs security practitioners in the first place because developers are just so excited to fix all of the vulnerabilities that get discovered by their handy scanner. That's also sort of failed. But I think a lot of people can look at those failures and miss the positives along the way as to why they didn't work. And the positives are that security has access to a lot more information and data than they've ever had before, because a lot of organizations just weren't scanning SAST, SCA, container, DAST, and the list goes on of IC secrets. Like I keep going and going of every scanner that security teams just didn't have access to, or maybe they only had access to one of these things. Maybe they took days to run at a time. And so I think really what happened with shift left was that security got DevOpsified, where we could actually just run these things in a way that kept up with modern practices. And that's really good. I think that version of shift left is alive and well, and we identify vulnerabilities earlier, which is certainly better than later. And we build processes to patch them. So I think there's an aspect of which it failed that was always probably too optimistic and too bought into the marketing Kool-Aid. And then there's an aspect of it that has really succeeded, which is people are more aware of software security than ever before. So,
yeah. Thank you. I've got a round robin of questions to everybody to get us started, right? And then hopefully out of that we flow a nice organic discussion. So Robert, can I come to you? And so what's your experience of, dev teams, developers, engineering managers who are now working with modern security tools? Do they, as James say, are those developers really caring or not caring about fixing security issues, I guess is the question.
I think we've successfully shifted left in a lot of ways, but it's probably not as left as many people wanted to. I say that because it usually gets caught in CI pipelines at this point in time. And it's usually an afterthought of, I need to go make a feature or make a change to an existing feature, and someone introduces a vulnerability, and as it's going through code review, those different SAST tools will discover things in your CI pipelines. It's not all the way to as a person's actually making a feature or editing an existing feature or refactoring a feature that they introduce something along the way, because they're just not thinking about it. They're very focused on their feature work. So I think in many ways the hope that people wanted, which was that we TDD security all the way to the left, I don't think that happened, and I don't actually know how to make that happen either as a manager, how to encourage that practice offhand.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. And Luca, let's go to you. You talk to lots of engineers, engineering managers, and so on. So I'm interested in your understanding of what sort of the industry standard sort of practices are here, what people are bothering doing, what they're not bothering doing. Rob says it just gets caught in CI at the moment. Do you think that's true, or do you think, like on average, the industry is like ahead or behind of that?
Yeah, I think there's obviously a trajectory that goes more and more like towards the left, and I really build on what Jim's and Robert said about what we mean about with left, what left really is. But I think we should also make a difference when you say standard practices between standard in the sense that these are obviously good practices if you're able to do them, versus standard, in the sense that these are things that are adopted by many, many teams, if not most teams. So I think there is consensus that since security is a design topic, the more you can address that, like on the left, the better in terms of the workflow, the development process. But I agree with James also that this kind of DevOpsification has not completely succeeded, because security, I think it's still like a very niche and reliant on specific expertise topic. So I think DevOps was enabled by the fact that tooling made things easier and easier, and so reduced the cognitive load for developers in doing many things, and so allowed people to take on more responsibility on more things that they didn't do before. I think we cannot say that completely for security yet. But for sure, there has been an evolution in the sense that even catching things in CI/CDs, as Robert said, is a big improvement towards the left, as opposed to what we would be discussing like 10 years before, like just putting out fires in productions, which was like the standard case. But I think when it comes to what people really do on their teams, it's hard to say, because security is not really something people like to talk about in detail. I feel that many tech leaders feel this sense of insecurity, if you allow me like this little pun, towards how they handle that. And I think because they feel this kind of gap between what is the wishful thinking and what they should do versus the reality of their teams.
Interesting. Picking up on the cognitive load bit there, I think that's an interesting point, that actually, have we actually gone the other way and tried to dump too much cognitive load on developers now by saying, okay, actually now you need to take responsibility for security? Is that part of the problem here, do you think? Anybody?
Yeah, I definitely think that is, you should be very aware that if you add some piece of responsibility to people, they should have the space to take on that. And not only meaning the skills, sometimes people have the skills, but they don't have the space on top of everything else they're doing to take on that. And so, I mean, even if something is obviously a good practice, it stays wishful thinking because people can take it.
Yeah. That's sort of related. Robert, let's ask you this question from the Q&A from Swapnil. Is there a limit to identify where shifting left becomes far too left and it becomes more of a burden than actually helping?
Probably. I think my general answer is like, can you take it too far? Sure, you can take it too far. You can put too much cognitive load. If you have as like a definition of done for every single feature that you're working on, to acknowledge positive or negative that you've addressed the OWASP top 10 and each one of them as part of the definition of done, I think that probably has gone too far, right? I think all security professionals in the room would be like, oh no, you should do that. But that's a lot of load to like think about. I am trying to add a button to the screen, and I need to think now about whether or not I'm exposing server-side request forgery as a specific attack vector.
But I think that even gets at the heart of how to do shift left really is super hard, and tools can't really help you do it, where it's creating custom secure by design modules of like, hey, here is how we implement new buttons. You just import the package and use our new button thing, and you rely on frameworks to do a lot of the heavy lifting for implementation for you. And so that's where a lot of the shift left discussion should really be more about the architecture and the libraries and the repeatable patterns. But it's hard to sell a tool that does that. And so a lot of the industry has been built around this like scanning that happens instead of bigger picture questions about like the quality of your different libraries and frameworks and how you're actually using them.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I'll go a little bit further. There's this tension that exists because I've tend to work at smaller organizations, and you have limited amount of time and limited amount of therefore cognitive space to interact with things. And so if you have a business that is 20 or 30 people and you are just trying to get to 10 million ARR, and that's all you're trying to do right now, the security question is oftentimes about risk mitigation as opposed to risk minimization, right? Like, how do we prevent things that absolutely murder us as opposed to things that are bad, but, you know, we'll deal with later.
Yeah, and that for me, that plays a little bit into the whole part of security, which is how do you know if you're winning? Like, how do you really know if you've actually mitigated something or if you've minimized it? You know, judging the ROI on security investments is really hard. Anyone got any thoughts or metrics or attempts to measure that?
I appreciated someone telling me to just like give up on it. Like I was talking to, I was interviewing a CISO at like a big organization, and I asked them, how do you show that security is not just a cost center? And they said it is a cost center. And then you just kind of move on from there. And I appreciate, but there are ways. That said, I think it's optimistic to say that we're like generating revenue. I think the closest you can get to that is if you're focused on creating some of those paved pathways for developers to ship faster because they know what modules to use, because you're building more pre-baked components, and that's a very tight relationship with the DevOps team. But as far as measurements, I think we should focus. There's one of the key metrics to change from is we've done a lot historically on how many vulnerabilities do you have and how long are they there for, and you do like an SLA based on the discovered time versus the fixed time. And I think that really does a disservice to the organization, because the real question is how long is it before a developer's aware of something and then it gets fixed, which misses some of the hard part is often moving from a detection to a ticket that's picked up and looked at by a developer. And so that tends to be the long part, not the necessarily the fixing part itself once the ticket gets picked up. And the other piece of that is moving to a more remediation centric approach to how are we building this program. So we should focus on things like how often are services redeployed, how long have they been alive for, how are we moving towards ephemeral infrastructure, those sorts of bigger questions that deal with the patching problem along the way, as opposed to treating everything by like this CVE was around for 90 days, but this CVE was around for 105 days. That tends to miss the larger context of, okay, why are CVEs around for that long at all? Like, why is patching this so hard? How can we help make patching a more easy and repeatable experience?
Yes. And since we're at 20 past, talking about fixing things really easily, how is that for a segue? Going to take a little minute. See, I told you I could do it. Take a little minute to talk a little bit about. I hope I can manage to share my screen back to my other Firefox window. I can't. Never mind. It's just a slide that says guardrails on it. So what Codacy has been up to the last month is evolving our Guardrails feature set, which is an IDE plugin that will load up an MCP server, which allows you to talk not only to the Codacy API, but now to be able to actually scan your code as your AI writes it, which allows us to do all sorts of exciting things. So we're just going to spend a little 10 minutes here. I'll introduce Alejandro Rizzo, our product engineering manager, who is going to show us around this fantastic new thing that I am super excited about. And there's very little things I go, yes, really super excited. I'm actually really super excited about this. Ali, take it away. Show us amazing things.
Hi, hello everyone. Let's share first. Let me share the screen. And I hope you guys are seeing the screen if everything is working okay. And let's go over a quick demo of what Guardrails is. when we're talking about guardrails as in Codacy, we're talking mainly about three things working together some that we already had, some that we already have been working on recently. One is our VS Code ID extension that now also works with Cursor and Windsurf. Our CLI for local analysis to run tools locally, all Codacy tools with Codacy configuration locally on the developer machine, and our quite fresh, not new now, but still fresh Codacy MCP server, all of them making guardrails. And the easy thing here, and I'm starting here with showing the extension and showing how the extension looks, because part of setting up many times an MCP server, if you try it, like, a bit cumbersome, and there are like, a lot of pieces there. And we are trying to make everything quite simple with guardrails. And so if you have the Codacy ID extension, you will see that you can, here I have it already set up and globally on my machine, the MCP server. So it tells me, hey, Codacy Guardrails MCP server is enabled. I can reset it if I want. The same for the CLI, I can set it up. It requires initialization, installation of many dependencies and things. And it's very similar to NPM packages, and it's just with clicking a button, you set up the CLI. Like, I'm gonna do this, and this was a repo that I grabbed Codacy CLI installed successfully. This will basically create on your project a .codacy folder with some things and the CLI command and the setup of your configuration and things. All of this is managed by the ID extension, and it makes it simpler to set up all of the things. What does this allow then? Let's go with some examples. Here I have a empty project. I just have, the basic minimum folders to run the CLI and run some rules on my cursor setup, right? So I'm gonna create something new here, and let's try creating create lightweight web server in Java. I'm working with the agent in Cursor, is telling me that, yeah, I'm gonna start creating your web server in Java. I'm gonna use Undertow, that is a high performance lightweight web server library. Here's the code that Cursor created, and I'm already getting like this red here, the Codacy CLI running locally on the IDE already detected that there's an insecure dependency. The MCP at the very same time says, hey, I added a dependency, let me run Codacy security analysis. It checked, found that there were like insecure dependencies and vulnerabilities. So it's updating the version, and I get this already fixed while it's still, creating things. It's running more security analysis on this to understand these things. And then it just finishes. It's telling me now how to run it and everything. But yeah, I mean, this is like the good thing of having all of these parts working together. Both the CLI with the IDE saying, and the MCP also knowing that it needs to do this kind of checkings and fixing it as it goes, which is kind of cool seeing it all work together, come up with things, and sometimes, like do this missteps, introduce a mistake, but at the same time, Codacy jumping in to help and the AI doing the fix instantly. This is it's an empty project, and we're creating something from the ground up for the day-to-day work. We are not creating new things all the time or new code all the time. The good thing is that our MCP server not only does local analysis, it also connects with the Codacy API. So, for example, there's this. Let's go to the. This is our own MCP. This is the actual MCP server repository. The one that we have is a public repository. You can go check it, help, contribute. this repository, this project, we know it has a lot of duplication, right? That is like something that we humans do, and also AI will do, and does quite often, adding complexity, adding duplication, adding repeated code. So one thing that this is also good for is to do some sort of refactors and improvements, right? So let's say find the files with most duplication and refactor them to fix it. And let's see. This is, first of all, is calling the Codacy API, a called MCP tool, and it's calling Codacy list files. It says there are like many files with significant duplication. Then it starts to get on each file to understand what are the clones in those files. Now it's, well, and there's now the agent and cursor doing AI things. In the meantime, while this is being generated and the code is being refactored, I'm using cursor, but the extension MCP server and all of these tools are available also for Windsurf and for VS Code with Copilot. And the CLI is just a command line tool. It can run on Mac, Linux, Windows. It's not something that needs the ID. The ID is using the CLI. And the same for the MCP server is something that is using the ID, but it's actually just an MCP server that you can even use with cloud chat and connect it and talk and get information from Codacy chatting. This will keep going and doing refactors.
It's sort of amazing how long these things can go for without any human interaction now, isn't it?
Yes.
I did joke on LinkedIn the other day that if you leave a cursor prompt unattended for long enough on YOLO mode, it will actually turn into Skynet. There, I got one more laugh. That's a total of 3 laughs I've got out of that.
And it's good to know also that many of them have a limit, but this limit are just a setting, so one can always go and increase the limit in the settings. I think it's 25 the default for VS Code and 50 the default for cursor, and you just can put that number up.
Yeah.
We can wait until it finished. Okay, and now we know that finished because it's telling me, hey, I'm done. Now let me run Codacy analysis to check if there are any issues with the changes, which is how we train how this whole set of tools trains the agent to know that every time that it makes changes, introduces dependencies, changes code, to use the CLI analysis to check that everything is okay, both for quality and for security, right? It's gonna go checking like all of the different files, the things it did, says, hey, I'm happy, and that's it. Let me show one more example of the potential that this unlocks. Recently, we introduced Dast, and actually, we used to have like the ability to import Dast results into our SRM dashboard. Now we can run Dast scans ourselves. This is our Codacy organization, and we had this test PHP application for which we ran a Dast scan, and we got, like a lot of results here for this Dast scan. And these are, example things that we can get. And the funny thing here is that we are running a Dast scan against a running server, an application running somewhere. This is not against a project code, a repository, or anything, even though the code running this application is somewhere, right? So if I go to this actual PHP application, right, and I try to leverage what Codacy knows about this and the power of AI to make this fix, I can come and say, hey, fix all Dast security reported issues. And you know I run a Dast scan, and I just came to the repository that I know that application is running, and this is calling Codacy also to get all of the issues found on the Dast scan, is getting these things and then going to the code and understanding for those problems detected by a Dast scan, what changes does it need to do on the code to fix those problems, which is also really amazing and really unlocks a lot of things.
There are people selling specialized tools like Wiz Code, where you actually have to go and do a load of instrumentation to make a lot of this stuff work out of the gate. But with the DAST issues and the SAST issues and the ability to actually go and read the code, then you can shortcut a lot of that specialized tooling, I think, for a lot of cases.
Yeah, it will start, well, making all of the modifications and everything. That's it. I think I showed you guys not only the protection and safety that Guardrails gives when generating code, to understand that everything is generated safely without any vulnerabilities, without any quality issues or concerns. But also, like the potential unlocked with this about connecting things together and using these tools for new things. That's it. Thank you, Kendrick.
Amazing. Thank you, Ali. I've seen these demos a few times, and I'm still excited every time. Thank you. Okay, so let us return to the topic at hand of why shift left is failing and how to address it. I hope we've shown you a way that you might address it, but there's a few questions in the Q&A around AI. Inevitably, we have to talk about AI. I mean, we just showed AI writing a bunch of code and fixing a bunch of code for us. So I wonder if anyone wants to chip in on those questions, like does the panel have any concerns around the integration of AI into every aspect of coding, managing, testing from a security and privacy viewpoint? And then the other one is, what role does AI play in shifting left? Anyone want to chime in on the potentially the threat or the solution of AI in this topic?
May I go for it, Kendrick?
Please, please.
Yeah. So I actually incredibly hopeful about these things because coming back to the idea that we were discussing before of the cognitive load for developers, right? The demo you showed and all these new generation of developer tools powered by AI is exactly, in my opinion, what allows developers to offload a lot of cognitive load in dealing with these things and enables going faster and producing higher quality things, which doesn't mean that you need to 100% trust whatever AI says with your eyes closed. This is kind of a fallacy that I see many people saying, but it's just that you can like distribute better like responsibilities and make individual developers take on more things, while the actual specialists, just like we still have DevOps engineers, like the security engineers can act as coaches, like enabling and empowering teams on high level and high value stuff instead of having to check, the long tail of small things that plug every teams every day. And I think this kind of approach where you have like an MCP server and the tools pull information from other sources allows AI to get context from other places, which is exactly kind of the limitations that we see in models today. Because I don't know your experience, but in my experience, AI coding fails when AI cannot access like live and recent information about like frameworks, libraries, APIs, vulnerabilities, or even context about things happening in your team. Like you have already done a dust check and you have vulnerabilities and the model doesn't know while it is producing the code. So I'm very hopeful about this, and I have close to zero like concerns versus, you know, the opportunity that gets unlocked through these type of things.
Wow, thank you for that, Luca. James, close to zero concerns. Any comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally not I'm not a boomer security person that would be concerned, like overly freaked out about AI code just getting generated. I think it's more just there's a lot of speculation around the way the workflow is changing is still happening in real time, and that's to me the biggest potential issue is there are a lot of different code quality and design decision issues. And I think that's where AI really does a bad job. Like, I think it does a good job where you tell it, here's a specific problem I want to solve, or here's a blank slate to make something. But even just earlier today, I was experimenting with like a secrets. How do I redeploy this secret? And it starts deploying like Kubernetes secrets manager stuff like out of nowhere. And I think that's the sort of guidance issue that people are going to need more help on, is still the secure infrastructure piece. And I think what AI is actually helping with a lot is the discrete specific fixes, and then platforms like Codacy giving it the context that it needs into, you know, here's the latest version of this package that you can actually use, and here's how to get there, because of the training gap. But that's my main concern, is people doing very bizarre architectural things because they legitimately don't know what they're doing. And that happens without AI, but at least in a normal process, there's someone at some point on the DevOps team is like, hey, that's not how this works. And then we sort of refactor, versus here we can just kind of keep smashing our head against the wall until the thing works. I think that's the security issue, is just this like bizarre infrastructure configuration that ends up happening on the other side a lot of the time.
Interesting.
I'll tag on.
Mm.
I think that, so I've been around here for a minute in engineering, so about 15 years. And I remember when code formatting was novel, and then PRs, nits were actually real nitpicks about style. And if you work in a reasonable organization now, if someone starts that behavior, you were like, no, the code formatter put it this way, and we don't argue with the code formatter. You get it. You know, if you're in Python, it comes in black. You get one color, right? And that's your choice. We got very comfortable very quickly with putting things in CI, so we no longer have it as part of our cognitive load. And I don't see that there's any problem with us putting lots of things in while you work on code on the feature, moving it even further to the left. We were happy to have our IDEs be like, as you save a file, code format the entire thing, right? So I don't see that we'll have a problem of, hey, there's this diff that got added that seems to have insecure code, and having those things run off to AI stuff to ask about it. If your concern about AI is, oh, it will be used to train on my code, then use AWS Bedrock or your cloud version variant where it doesn't get trained on, right? That's the answer. Or you run local models if you're really paranoid.
Yeah. I want to come to Doug Hubbard's question. Hi, Doug. In light of the shift left conversation, are there any plans to integrate even sooner into the SDLC? So scans during POD and tech spec steps to ensure secure best practice designs. I think this is interesting because I think there's two separate questions to sort of phrase in here. One is, does having AI-driven security fixes give security engineers more time to engage earlier on in these processes? And is there a potential for AI tools that can read diagrams and point out security issues in diagrams? Any thoughts on that? Anyone?
All my diagrams are very insecure. I have lines that just say this thing can really talk to this other thing. I don't know. I think That's my sarcastic, spicy take that I don't know that there will be a ton of value to have a little thing on your shoulder being like, I don't know if that service is allowed to talk to that other one. I'm like, shut up. I'm drawing boxes with lines. I think it might turn into Clippy. But there's my spicy take. Someone give her a balanced take.
I think I've met with quite a few startups like ideating on this sort of piece, and it's a I think to me there's part of the fundamental question is like, would you ever pay money for this capability? In the abstract is like probably not. That's my like downside capability, but there is definitely something here as far as what I was saying, where people want to get, they don't realize that the answer to fixing a lot of this stuff is having clear guidance on how you're going to fix it. And even demoing some of this MCP stuff is probably very exciting because you never quite know what it's going to fix. But over time, people will want consistent fixes that are compatible with their organization overall and what those design documents say they want to be doing. And I think that's the further shift left opportunity is stuff like highlighting risky changes that are happening and creating some of those best practice guidelines and then importing those as context so that the LLM knows, hey, here's how we deal with SQL injections at our company. So yes, I think it makes a lot more sense as like an extension of just the things that are already happening.
Cool. We've talked a lot about tools, unsurprisingly, but are there things other than tools, cultural shifts, processes, practices that we should all be embedding in order to shift security left? Anyone want to comment on that?
My only rant in this space is that there's a lot of buzz around AI security because it is so jaw-dropping to go from like blank slate to make a Next.js app, and then it just makes it, and it's like, whoa, this is crazy. But then when you're in an enterprise environment and you're trying to actually wrangle some massive code base and make it do something, the usefulness of the LLM sort of plummets drastically in making some of those big enterprise changes. And so I think from an overall culture perspective, it's more about like, let's really think critically about the code changes that are happening and not get people to just YOLO add stuff. And I think that's going to be it. Once you start trusting the LLM to do stuff, that's when things get hairy, as you're just blindly accepting things and then wondering why it's not working and then backtracking. I think it's very helpful if you know what you're doing already.
Yeah, which sort of speaks to like continuing human-led review practices, right? Like whether it's you as a developer actually reading the diff before you commit and actually maintaining a standard like two-person, two sets of eyes PR check.
I think for engineering managers, that's got to be getting really, really hard to convince people to do. Because there was already an issue where people would trust. I remember getting a common security issue is people forging commits from like a chief architect kind of person, and then being like, then those just get blindly accepted because clearly like chief architect guy knows what he's doing and I don't, and so I'm just going to accept whatever they're putting through. And I think AI just is a layer of discipline above that that's going to be really hard to help people maintain.
Yeah, and I think this sort of feeds into a question that we have here around standard practice and bottlenecks at the moment. Like, I feel like if AI can suddenly generate 10x more code than your standard developers can, but developers can still only review code at the speed they've always reviewed code at, then that suddenly that review process starts to become a really time bottleneck, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's why with like, I don't think LLMs are. We start trying to build this crazy LLM infrastructure when it would have been faster to do some human stuff along the way, I think, for now. Until I think at some point things will get better enough to where RAG is working really well. It's fetching enough context to do really meaningful design review processes. I do think it'll get there. I'm not like a total hater. I just think for now we can end up over architecting and creating systems that are worse than the human in the loop version.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll be honest, as an engineering manager, if my time bottleneck became people just reviewing PRs, that's a great place to be at. because it's usually not the time bottleneck in my experience. It might be the time through time bottleneck in terms of I have to wait 24 hours to get someone to review something because they're not available because they're working on writing more code. So
I wonder if there is there's some clever startup idea here, isn't there, which will actually bring code reviews that you ought to be reviewing of other people's code while your LLM is generating your next set of code, so you can actually review other people's code in those 40 seconds while you're waiting for your one to finish.
I'm sure it's a Slack bot that's bringing it to you like, we saw you just push something in the next 30 seconds. Can you review this, please? All right, someone steal that,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. Well, we'll take 10%, but otherwise it's yours.
Yeah, I kind of think that we should believe that if tooling improves and AI performs, uniformly, it's like every part of the product development should become equally like faster. AI should help with everything, and so I'm not sure we will get to the point where there is a specific point that is an incredibly bigger bottleneck than the rest of the stuff. So I believe that even code reviews might be way faster thanks to AI, thanks to all the kind of static analysis that we can run that is offloaded from developers, and maybe even creating PRDs might get faster. So it's unclear to me. There will be bottlenecks for sure, but it's unclear to me honestly where these bottlenecks will be. But I agree with James and Robert that if you're building complex stuff or you're building stuff on top of a large code base, there's still a lot of improvements to be made in the tooling to make it human level. But I don't think it's on the intelligence side. I think it's really on the context and RAG side. And mostly because I think what goes into creating systems relies on context, a lot of context that is not just in the code base. It's in the ticketing system and the feedback that your manager has just given you in documents elsewhere, and AI still cannot take all that context from all these kind of places inside Cursor, for example, and create the perfect feature. That is still only in humans' head. But I also think these things may improve faster than we may expect. I don't know.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting consequences of the large return to office movement that happened over the past couple of years is there's a lot of stuff that was being written down that is now being put on whiteboards again and is now absent from that context. No one's taking screenshots of their whiteboards in person, right? They might remember to take a picture of it, but it's otherwise in the heads of everyone in the room.
Maybe there's another AI solution there to automatically digitize photos from whiteboards and integrate them into your knowledge base, right?
Yeah,
An
or
MCP
yeah,
for drawing boards.
install cameras everywhere in your workplace, point everywhere all the time, always looking at stuff.
We'll see no problems. All right, we're at 10 to the hour, so I'm just going to go through the last Q&As that we have open, and then we'll wrap up. There's only a few. First one from Gunnar. How up to date are the CVEs that we are shifting left? What is the risk threshold? So I presume that means the CVEs that we already understand. How are we? Is there a gap there between stuff that's being, I guess, not discovered, and therefore you can't scan for it? I guess that's the question. Is that a problem?
Yes, I mean it's why I try to emphasize these emerging ADR runtime security categories a lot because of this, where for some reason we really equated software security with CVE analysis, but the biggest breaches that happen are due to either some exploit of an existing CVE that the company was aware of already, or are due to like malicious supply chain takeover attempts. And between all the slowdowns with CVE.org, less CVEs getting disclosed, like the analysis issues upstream, I think the software security goal is a lot broader than just CVEs. And that's some of the stuff that on the static side, I think it needs to expand to include more malware analysis. And then on the runtime side, there's some emerging solutions that provide some of the like RASP type benefits without the implementation cost of RASP. And I think those are the things that altogether, I think the future of a complete software security program is something doing the scanning on the left side and giving developers what they need, and then augmenting it with runtime data and protection from the right side. But yes, CVs alone are not a security program.
Cool. Thomas Hughes has one a very long time ago. Sorry, Thomas. Hopefully you stayed at least through the recording to listen to the answer here. What metrics or tools for metrics would you suggest tracking as leading lagging indicators to determine the impact of workflow and tool changes on developer productivity, especially as it comes to the shifting left mantra, which promises improvements in these areas? How do we actually measure and track if it's impacting us as we expect?
I think a lot of people, when shift left was a thing, started putting like when it was just starting, not it's still a thing. But when it was getting started, the disillusionment with shift left is a result of the metrics not really changing, where like total vulnerabilities are still increasing, the time to remediate is still really long. And I think that those metrics are still okay or good. But the question is like, why haven't we been addressing these properly? And I think it's because instead of starting with a remediation game plan of how are we going to actually fix a lot of these things as they come up, we've started with a bottoms up approach of like, once I discover all the vulnerabilities and put blockers in pipeline, then they'll all go away. When the challenge was never really fundamentally about discovery, it's about remediation. But then I think those metrics still apply as far as what's the time to remediate the average vulnerability, how often are new services deployed, and things like that.
Luca, Robert, any comment on metrics and what tools we're using to tracking metrics for this? Apart from code, obviously.
I'll let Luca go first. I've been going a lot. Go ahead, Luca.
Oh, okay. So I think in general, and this is not like just for security. I think in general for developer productivity, if you're starting like from scratch, it's always a good idea to just have good conversations and run surveys to figure out what's the actual developer experience of people, what are the things that they hate, and whether they think that they think they're working well, and start from the things that people think need improving. Might be the code review process, might be the CI pipeline, might be something that you don't expect, but just start with small things as opposed to, which are usually the most leading and actionable stuff, as opposed to the big lagging indicators like the number of commits that the team creates per day, which is the end result of hopefully everything else that's going on. So have good conversations, run surveys that are qualitative, no shame in taking this kind of data as opposed to just telemetry, and start small. That's my advice.
I agree. Qual plus quant. You need both.
Yeah, I met one of the Agile Manifesto guys whose name I can never remember. Sorry, whoever that is, in Munich. He answered a very complicated question about how to tell whether some particular process was working in a scaled Agile format, about how teams should talk to each other, about how teams should be communicating, prioritizing work. And he said, just talk. Just get the right people in the room and talk. Ask them the question. And sometimes that can be the most straightforward solution to a problem. All right, we're at 5-2. I did promise some conclusions. I'm not sure I have any, honestly. We've had a good chat around everything to do with shift left. I guess some conclusions are that tools are not enough. AI is helpful, but too much of it can be a bad thing. And talk to people. Anyone else like to venture any conclusions? All right.
Just want to say thank you to everybody. It was a great chat, and I loved all the contributions and also the questions in the Q&A.
Yes, very much so. So thank you to James, Luca, Robert, Alejandro. Thank you to everybody who joined and watched. The recording will be available afterwards. And join us again in 3 months for another Codacy Showcase event. Take care, have a great day, and we'll see you soon.